Hello and welcome to Resilient Relationships. This session is focused on managing conflict and building trust. The Resilient Relationship series is provided to you by the Bow Valley Family Resource Network in an effort to support your relationship during this time of social distancing because of COVID-19. My name is Anthea Messier, and I am a social worker and relationship counselor in the Bow Valley. The other workshops in this series provide a foundation for this session. The happier and more connected your relationship is, the more likely you are to successfully navigate conflict. So I encourage you as we go through this session, if you haven't already watched the other sessions or similar content, to go back and watch those so that you can improve your relationship in the times where you're not in conflict, thus improving the likelihood that you'll manage conflict well. Resilience is the capacity to recover from adversity and pursue your goals despite challenges. It helps you survive the worst day of your life and thrive every day of your life. Lasting well-being in a changing world requires resilience, and resilience requires mental resources. All of these sessions are designed with the hope that you'll be able to build your mental resources, thus improving your resilience and the resilience of your relationships. How we feel and act both over the course of our lives and in specific situations is determined by these three factors: the challenges we face, the vulnerabilities these challenges trigger, and the strengths we have for meeting the challenges and protecting the vulnerabilities. Our intimate relationships are the places where we are the most vulnerable, or most likely to be triggered, and we may have high conflict because we are struggling to protect ourselves and the relationship. So what do we have conflict about? This is probably a familiar list, and I'm sure you could add to it. However, if we were robots, we'd be able to say, well, this is it. We fight about free time, money, housework, sex, extended family relationships, parenting. But really, what we're fighting about are the emotions and the things that are triggered as a result of these topics, not the actual topics. We have three fundamental needs that our brain is wired to protect and make sure we take care of: safety, satisfaction, and connection. It's always our hope that in our intimate relationship, we have these things. And when we feel as if we don't, we fight against that. So what do we really have conflict for? The need for respect, to feel valued and like we're a priority to our partner. We want fairness, which isn't necessarily equality. We want interdependence and the promises to be kept. We expect our partner to be reliable, and they expect us to be the same. We want and need honesty, emotional and physical presence of the person that we loved. We want to feel appreciated. We want to feel attached and connected. We want a commitment that says, I'm there for you no matter what, not a level of commitment that says, I'm there for you until something better comes along. We want attunement, to be deeply understood by our partner, and empathy when we need that. We want to be able to celebrate the good things and cry about the hard things. And when we don't have that, that's when we start to have conflict. So some things to consider when you're fighting for something, or you see that your partner is fighting for something, especially if that topic keeps coming up over and over again and you don't seem to move forward with it. These are the underlying things that drive us: our concerns, our hopes, our expectations of our partner, of the relationship for the future, our experiences in past relationships and our own childhood, what we saw our parents doing, what we appreciated about that, and what we did not appreciate about that, our beliefs about what should and shouldn't be, our needs, our assumptions about what's driving someone else, or what we think they should know or understand about us. We often have different perspectives from people, even in the exact same circumstances. We see it differently, and our values and our fears. If you stop and consider these things in topics that you're having conflict on, consider them for yourself and try to hunch what your partners might be. You may have less conflict than you do now. These are the things that actually drive us. So these are the things that need to be talked about. Trust in a relationship is essential for success. And when it comes to conflict, if we trust that our partner is going to try and change their behavior to support us, and that we are able to change our own behavior to support them, we're going to approach conflict with less tension and with hope. Mistrust when it comes to conflict in relationships is when we or the other person are trying our hardest to change the other person's behavior to benefit only ourselves. We don't often admit that that's what we're doing, but if we pause and think, am I actually willing to be influenced by someone else? Am I listening? Am I caring? Am I willing to negotiate? Those are the things that are going to help us to build trust. If our happiness is interconnected, if I can't be happy when my partner is devastated or sad or embarrassed because of something that I'm putting into their lives, then I'm more likely to be willing to adjust to that. And in a trusting relationship, both people are. So things can escalate very quickly in an intimate relationship because of those triggers and those fundamental needs. We are the most vulnerable with the people that we're closest to, and our brain is wired to protect us. So just like any threat, whether it's social, emotional, or physical, our system goes into fight, flight, or freeze. The amygdala is the alarm center of the brain. It's responsible for getting our heart rate going, our muscles fired up and warm. We stop digesting food so that all of our energy goes into survival. The amygdala's job is to get all of that going. The amygdala cannot tell if we're experiencing a social emotional threat or a physical threat. So our body is going to do the same thing anytime we feel frightened or triggered, even if that trigger is a look from our partner or a tone of voice. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that's responsible for our memories. And so when the amygdala says danger, 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 and kicks into gear and we start into fight, flight, or freeze, it then talks to the hippocampus basically. And the hippocampus says, hey, you know what we did last time we felt this kind of fear, or we had this kind of sensation or experience? We said this, we did that. And sometimes those are not the best things. So if our hippocampus is saying, well, if you shut down and ignore the person, or you escalate and yell, or if you say something hurtful, this problem will go away. The conflict will stop, you'll win, and everything will be okay. Then we apply that solution. If we were calmer, we wouldn't rely on just the fastest solution. We'd be looking for creative solutions that help us both to feel better. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's at our forehead, and it's responsible for coordinating the other systems in the brain and for helping us to problem solve, be creative, learn things. When we are in fight, flight, or freeze, we have very limited access to that prefrontal cortex. If we did a brain scan, we would see lots of stuff lighting up between the amygdala and the hippocampus, and not a lot going on with the prefrontal cortex. As soon as our heart rate is over 100, then we are not accessing that. So when you're in conflict, it's important that you know that these biological, normal, healthy things are going on in a response to stress, but we need to stop for about 20 minutes minimum, take a break, walk away, an agreed break. I'm flipping my lid and I need to calm down. Go into separate spaces and do things that help you to self-soothe and calm down. Have a cup of tea, take a shower, go for a run, do something to help your system reset, and then come back to the conversation and try to have it again. This time with a little bit more calmness, taking big, deep breaths and trying to listen and understand your partner. If you're in fight, flight, or freeze, there's no point in continuing the conversation because you're not going to come up with good solutions, and likely you'll make things worse. How many times do we end a conflict and later think, oh, why did I say that? I can't believe that came out of my mouth. What was I thinking? The thing is, you weren't actually thinking with the full capacity of your brain. If you go online and look up Dr. Dan Siegel, you can see an explanation of the parts of the brain. He talks about the evolution of the brain and also the idea of flipping your lid. It's a great tool, using your hand as the model of the brain and how flipping your lid works, and to explain that to your partner or to your children so that you have a shared understanding of that physiological response and the need to stop your argument and reset. According to Thomas Kilmann, there's 5 basic styles of resolving conflicts or managing conflicts. Some are cooperative, some are assertive, and then they're also unassertive and uncooperative. So you can see on the side here, the unassertive to assertive going up and down, and uncooperative to cooperative. So right in the middle, compromising would be the balance of all of those things. There are times when each of these is completely appropriate. If I'm playing soccer and I'm not competing, no one's going to want me on their team. The goal is to win. If I say, oh, you really want this ball, go ahead and have it, that's not going to be how that game is played. So in some situations, we need to be competing. If I'm in a courtroom, I want to be on the winning side, right? So there's times where competing is absolutely appropriate. It is very assertive, but it is uncooperative. Collaborating in conflict, the goal is a win-win solution. So you're both trying to get what's best for you. It's assertive. You are clearly stating what it is you need or want or what you're trying to accomplish. And cooperating, you're also listening and willing to negotiate and move things back and forth to make it the best for everyone. In avoiding, which is something that we often see in relationships, the goal is to delay, to not have to deal with this. I'm going to avoid it by shutting down, by not coming home from work right away, by busying myself with chores or with the children, by going to bed at a different time than my partner, making sure that we're not alone in the room together as much as possible so that I can avoid conflict. It is unassertive and uncooperative. It's hard for the other person to know what your actual needs are, and that is very damaging to a relationship. When we don't truly express ourselves, resentment builds. Accommodating is very cooperative, but unassertive. If one person is yielding to the other most of the time and their own needs aren't being met, again, it's not an open, honest relationship then. If you're agreeing to things or putting up with things that really aren't working for you and the other person doesn't know it because you're not clearly communicating it, it's cooperative, but it's not assertive. And assertive is something that comes along with honesty and that building of trust in relationships. How can someone attempt to meet your needs if you're not even saying what they are? So going back to that list of things that you need to be thinking about and talking about, if your partner doesn't know what you believe or what you need or what you're hoping for, then you are not truly solving your conflicts. You are accommodating, and that's not healthy either. In an unhealthy conflict, we often see defensiveness, contempt, criticism, stonewalling, counterattacks where somebody brings something up and you are unable to take responsibility for it. So instead you start saying things like, well, look at when you did that, or how come we have a double standard here? You get to and I don't. And instead of saying, yes, this is my part in it, it's putting the other person on the defensive. Righteous indignation, so that's when we're saying that it's not our fault and how dare they kind of a thinking or attitude. Innocent victim, well, I didn't know, I can't be held accountable for that. You're not taking into account my needs, which might be true. But in a conflict, we need to be, instead of an innocent victim, we need to be an assertive partner in that conversation. And in unhealthy conflict, we don't see repair attempts. When a conflict is going in a bad direction and you see that it's escalating, a repair is when we try to stop that. You might say something like, okay, hold on, I think we're getting out of hand here. Can we get back to the topic at hand? Or being able to say, you know, I really love you and I'm struggling right now with what's going on. So in repair, we try to fix that. In unhealthy relationships, we don't see that repair. So practicing these conversations where you're the speaker and the listener is very important for getting better and better at solving conflict and resolving stressful things in your relationship. If you're going to have a conflict conversation, try to pick an appropriate time and place. a time where you're not going to be disturbed, where the kids aren't going to need you, you're not running out the door, where you actually can focus on one another. Choose a place where you will be uninterrupted. Put away all distractions. Make eye contact. Plan ahead. Think about that list of things, your concerns, hopes, fears, goals. Try to think about what the other person might need or want, and what would be something that would create win for you. Know what your limitations are, and then also, what do you think might create win for them in that situation, so that you can try to think in advance about what might come up. Plan for your emotional state as well. If you are exhausted and overwhelmed, then starting a stressful conversation may not be the best thing to do. You also have to think, how will I handle when fight, flight, or freeze starts? Can I take a break? Will I have some water nearby? Will I go outside for a breath of fresh air? What am I going to do when I need to reset? Be prepared to take turns in the role of speaker and listener. Sometimes only one person gets to talk, and know that it's not okay to interrupt. I see that a lot in counseling sessions where one person starts to talk, the other person is anxious to engage, and that's a good thing, but will interrupt and cut them off and make assumptions about what it is they were going to say. So you really need to take on that active listening role. Make sure that before you try to get to a problem-solving level, you understand one another. In conflict, it's not that important that we agree on everything. We're going to agree on some things, and we are going to disagree on some things. The goal in solving conflict is to come to a deep understanding of each other, and then try to come up with a plan that creates that benefit for both of you. And in this conflict conversation, make sure you've thought in advance what kinds of things repair this relationship. If you have a happy, healthy relationship most of the time, those repair attempts are going to be very successful. You'll be able to stop and reset. So let's look at the roles of both of those a little deeper. So the speaker, you have to separate your view of this conflict from your view of the relationship. Threatening the relationship doesn't have to be something that you do. Think about what you hope your partner will understand, not what you want them to do. You can't get in your little trench and decide, this is where I'm going to fight my battle. You want to think about, if they understood me, here's what it would be. Be aware of your nonverbal communication, your body language, your voice, how close you are. Don't have a conversation where you're across the room from one another or too close. I always tell couples, I think it's a bad idea to try and have conversations like this in bed. Your bed is a sacred space. It's for intimacy and sleep, not for conflict. Use I statements, we talked about in one of the other videos. I feel, I think, I need. Talk about your experiences in a way that is not pointing fingers at the other person and saying you, and having them go on the defensive. Be specific in what you're talking about. State your needs as wishes and in the positive. So you might say something like, I wish you would go out with me sometimes with my friends, instead of, how come you never do anything with me and my friends? I don't think you like them. Because now the other person has to defend whether or not they like your friends, instead of saying, I wish sometimes you would do things with us. Respect your partner's vulnerabilities. Chances are you know what they are, and you know what's going to trigger them. If you know that your partner had a difficult childhood, don't say things like, oh, now you're playing the part of your dad. That will be devastating. And while your partner is trying to recover from that emotional blow, the whole conversation is falling apart. If you know that your partner had a bad relationship with their parents, or that conflict was something that they avoid, you need to be their cheerleader, saying things like, I'm so glad you're able to try and talk about this. I can respect that you need a break right now. And I'm glad that we're able to try and solve this. Stay on topic. Stay in the present moment. Don't bring up everything from the past. If you're bringing it up because you think there's a pattern, that's legitimate. But try and stay in the moment right now, and avoid things like always and never. You always do this. You never do that. The other person is going to be looking for the exception to that statement and thinking about that instead of taking in what you're saying. If you're using I statements and saying things like, I feel left out when you make plans without me. I would like at least once a week to do something that's just you and I. There, you've stated what you need and what you wish for in the positive, instead of saying things like, I hate when you go out with your friends. It makes me miserable. You're really selfish. I've heard people say things like that. We're driven to that when we're trying to get those fundamental needs met. Make sure when you're the speaker, you pause, breathe, and take that time to self-regulate. Keep checking in. If you're in fight, flight, or freeze, you need to take a break and you need to take responsibility for that. Remember, all feelings are acceptable. Not all behaviors are acceptable. Again, now let's look at the listener. The listener, same thing. You also have to separate your view of this conflict from your view of the relationship. Your partner is not your adversary. If you can look at the relationship as something that you are trying to work on and build connection and trust in, instead of something you are trying to win over, you're going to listen better. Same as the other person, you need to pause, breathe, self-regulate, speak up when you need a break. If you feel like you're shutting down or you're overwhelmed by your emotions, then you need to have that time to reset. To expect ourselves not to be triggered when someone is telling us that we've done something that hurt or upset them is unrealistic. We're not going to stay calm the whole time, so the goal needs to be then to come back to a state of calm as frequently as necessary. As the listener, you have to put your own agenda aside, at least for now. Remember, this is a process where you're taking turns sharing this information back and forth, so you will get your chance. It might be a good idea to write things down so that you know that you're truly taking them in, and then you're not trying as hard to hold on to your side of the story so that you can get the other person to understand you. If you're taking notes on what they're saying, then you know you're going to think of what you need later yourself. You may even want to start this conversation by having some notes with you so that you're clear on what it is, like I said before, that you want the other person to understand. But as the listener, it's your job strictly to take in information, manage your own emotions, and be ready to paraphrase and show empathy. So paraphrasing is saying back in your own words what it is you heard, talking about their emotions and their thinking. You can ask open-ended questions to clarify and gain more information, but not to manipulate or change it to your perspective. Don't get caught up in the facts. Sometimes people will say, well, it was on this day at this time and this is what happened. And the other person's like, no, it wasn't that day. That wasn't the situation. And I encourage you to step away from those details, because most of the time we're fighting about that emotional content. So the actual outside stuff isn't necessarily valuable to us. But if we're able to say, when this happens, I feel this way, it doesn't matter if it happened on Tuesday or Friday. The point is when it happens. If it happens every day or it happens once a year, I'm impacted by it, and this is how. We need to be willing as the listener to take in the other person's perspective, even if it doesn't match ours. We want to remember that this person is someone that we are trying to love, honor, and cherish. And if we're building the relationship up in times where we're not in conflict, this piece is much easier. Don't take their emotions personally, but take into account how your behaviors are affecting them. This is a tough role, the listener. And actually the speaker is a tough role too. And this is going to take practice. So you need to do conflict conversations frequently in small pieces. So maybe limiting it to, let's talk about just this one issue that keeps coming up until you've solved that. And remember, you need to take breaks. When you reach the problem solving or how do I cope with this part of conflict, you want to brainstorm for solutions. So before you do this, you have an understanding of the other person's perspective. You could tell their story. You're like a reporter who could document the whole thing. And they've done the same for you. So then brainstorming for solutions is looking for creative ideas. Given that this is your need and this is my need, what are some of the things that might meet that? Be open to influence from that person. And if you're not able to take in their ideas, then whose ideas would you be willing to listen to? So one of the things that's coming up now for lots of people is with COVID-19, it's so confusing. There's so much information available and it seems to change every day. And we don't know what we should be doing. And so in lots of couples relationships right now, people are seeing it differently. And one person may feel like we need to be increasingly social distancing and taking safety precautions. And the other person might be thinking, you know what, let's just get on with it and not do that. If you're not going to find a middle ground between the two of you, then make decisions about whose advice will you follow. So it might look something like, you know what, I don't think COVID is a big deal, but I'm willing to wear a mask and follow the recommendations of Alberta Health Services. And the other person might be thinking, well, I'm thinking that it is extremely serious, but I am willing to socialize outside with our group of friends. So looking for what are the things that you're able to live with and whose advice can you and will you follow. When you're in the compromising part of negotiation, don't over compromise. What you come up with needs to be realistic and sustainable. Lots of times we see someone make an agreement to say, yeah, I'll do that, and then they never do it. And I think in that moment, they weren't lying. They actually had the intention of doing it. It sounded good. It felt good. They want to make the other person happy. They want the conflict to go away. It might be a way of avoiding future conflict to say, yep, that's what we'll do. But be honest. What are you actually able to do and willing to do? If you try something and realize, you know what, I can't actually do this. My heart's not in it. I'm not going to follow through. Then you need to come back to this negotiation and have another conversation. Take into account the core needs for both of you: safety, security, and detachment. And also, again, that list of concerns, hopes, fears, expectations. What are the things that are going to make it easier for you to trust each other and to be successful in solving the solvable problems and learning to live with the things that can't be solved? Some problems can't be solved. Sometimes it's about just modifying things in our problem solving. It doesn't have to be all or nothing or black and white. We might change the timing of something. So when you're talking, be really clear about what it is you need. I've had people say, I need to spend more time with you. And the other person says, I can't be with you 24/7. Well, these days we can be and we are, but it's typically we're not. And so somebody saying, I need some space is legitimate. So being clear, no, I don't need you to be with me 24/7. Actually, I was hoping that we could go rock climbing once a week, or I'd like it if we got a babysitter and we went for a ski. So negotiating what are the specific things that would make you feel more connected. Or actually, I was hoping we could go to bed at the same time so that we'd have some time there before sleep to connect. So think broadly and simply in your problem solving. Timing, location, duration of things. What are some of the things that you can do to reach the goals for both of you? What I'm talking about in this session is not designed to prevent or deal with family violence. Family violence is an abuse of power in a family. It destroys trust in a relationship. If you are wondering whether or not your situation includes family violence, whether you think perhaps you're the person who is doing some things that would be harming someone else, or you are the person being harmed, I encourage you to go to this website, Recognize Family Violence, and learn more about what family violence looks like. What are the signs and symptoms of it, and what are the supports that might be available to you? If you are experiencing family violence, please reach out. This is not something that you are causing, and it's not something that you can fix on your own. If you could, you would have already. It's something that grows over time and becomes more dangerous. So please reach out to the supports that are available to you. In the Bow Valley, in an emergency, of course, always call 911. The YWC in Banff has specialists for domestic violence and sexual abuse support. They can also set you up with shelter if you need someplace safe to go. That includes during this time of COVID-19. Just because we're limiting some of the resources that are available does not mean that you have to stay in an abusive space. Bow Valley Victim Services can also be a great resource in setting you up with emotional and physical supports and safety. Anytime you can walk into the urgent mental health at the hospital. They're open 7 days a week from 2 to 9. You just go in and go to the emergency room. And then we also have a list here of some non-local helplines where you can talk to someone about what's going on. Sometimes we're not really even sure whether or not we're in a violent situation. So I encourage you to talk to people, reach out, learn more, and make sure that you and your children are safe. The topics in this video have been based on resources from Drs. John and Julie Gottman and the Gottman Institute, Dr. Rick Hansen, and Dr. Dan Siegel. The Gottmans focus on parenting and relationship. Dr. Rick Hansen focuses on the brain and happiness and hardwiring the brain for happiness and positivity. And Dr. Dan Siegel also focuses on parenting and brain development. And as I was talking about earlier, has a great description of flipping your lid and how the brain works under stress. If you're struggling in any area, the Bow Valley has resources available. The Bow Valley Family Resource Network focuses on parenting and children's needs, families' needs from birth to 18 years of age. The Family and Community Support Services through the town of Canmore has resources across the lifespan and in many, many areas. The town of Canmore and the town of Banff both have call-in centers, help desks during this time of COVID. And of course, 211 in the Bow Valley, you just dial 211 and the people there are able to give you updated information about the resources that are available, everything from how to find a family doctor to where to go for help for financial, emotional, physical health, food, and they can set you up with the appropriate contact information. I encourage you to keep taking care of yourself. Reach out if you need support. And I hope that you are healthy, happy, and well. Thank you.